But this I say, he who sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and he who sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. Now, one of the things I want you do remember, Galatians chapter 6 bears this out also. You do remember that as long as the earth remains, there is the law of seed time and harvest. The law of seed time and harvest. Seed time and harvest. Some people say, well, that's just karma. No, seed time and harvest is a lot more powerful than karma. Okay? Seed time and harvest is a law. It's the law that the earth operates on. The Bible tells us over in Genesis chapter 6. It's the law that the earth operates on. As long as the earth remains, it's going to operate on the law of seed time and harvest. If you want to harvest, you sow a seed. And that is true in every area. If you want to have friends, be friendly. If you need money, then sow money. It's seed time and harvest. Whatever you sow, that's what you're going to get back multiplied. So the Apostle Paul here is writing about that, and he is talking particularly about finances here. He says, let each one give as he purposes in his heart, not grudgingly or of necessity, for God loves a cheerful giver. Now this word cheerful in the Amplified Bible means a hilarious, cheerful giver. And just beside yourself. And the reason for that doesn't mean he's goofy. It means that this person that's cheerful understands what's happening when they give. They get excited and happy because they understand that this principle of seed time and harvest is in activation. Now I want to ask you this question. The law of seed time and harvest, who activates that in your life? You do. Your job, listen to me very carefully, your job is not the multiplying part. Your job is the obedience part or the giving part. You're the one that sets it into motion. You remember over in Luke chapter 6, verse 38, give and it shall be given unto you, good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over will men give into your bosom. I used to have an object lesson that I would do in children's church to demonstrate this, and I had a big old jar of jelly beans. Big old jar of jelly beans. And so what I would do is I'd have one of the children come up, and so they had a spoon, like a tablespoon. And so they would take a tablespoon of jelly beans that I had given them, and they would take that tablespoon and they would put it in a bowl. They'd put one tablespoon. Well, I would take that tablespoon and I would go to the demijohn jar full of jelly beans, and I would start good measure, pressed down, shaking together, running over, putting jelly beans, and they could take those jelly beans back with them. Some of the moms weren't real happy when their children had that many jelly beans. So the next one that came up, I gave them a soup ladle. And so they dipped out of soup and they put it in the bowl. And so I grabbed good measure, pressed down, shaking together, and running over. And so then the third one, that was all that was up there. There was a tablespoon and a soup ladle. And so the next one that came up, I went back here and I held a shovel up. Well, oh no! Well, we didn't actually get to that part. I just gave them but see, they got the point that the measuring stick that you use doesn't change the law. The law works all the time. You're the one that determines the measuring stick that's used to multiply it back to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over. So it's going to work. The principle works. It's just the level that it works is determined by you. Are you going to give a tablespoon, a soup ladle, a shovel, a front end loader, or a drag line? Y'all ever seen a drag line at a mining coal? And I mean, these things look like dinosaurs. Especially if you go out there at night, because they've got lights on the masts of them and stuff like that. And I mean, they are putting a bucket in there that's half as wide as this room is going in, and whoo, good measure, pressed down, shaking together, running over. Drag line. So here the Apostle Paul is saying, so let each one of you give, for God loves a cheerful, a giver understands this. Now I want you to also notice this, that it says, for God loves a cheerful giver. I want you to just hang on for a minute. I want to continue. And God is able, I want you, man, verse 8 is awesome. God is able to make all grace. I want you to look at verse 8 and think of the word thrive. God is able to make all grace. Remember, grace is God's willingness to use His ability and power on our behalf, even though we don't deserve it. I mean, people say grace is God's unmerited favor. Grace is an acronym, God's riches at Christ's expense. And those are fine definitions. But the best definition of grace that I have ever heard is grace is God's willingness to use His ability and power on our behalf, even though we don't deserve it. That's a real good definition of grace. He's able to make all grace abound toward you, that you always, having all sufficiency in all things, may have an abundance for every good work. Let's read that again. He's able to make all grace abound toward you, that you always have all sufficiency in all things, and may have an abundance for every good work. Does that sound like thriving to you? Does that sound like tens of thousands, tens of 10,000s to you? Verse 10. Now may He who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food supply and multiply the seed you have sown and increase the fruits of your righteousness. Now, I told you just a few minutes ago with the word giver, up in verse 7, the end of verse 7, giver, and I want you to pay attention to something here in verse 10. Now may He who supplies seed to the sower. Whenever you add the suffix er on the end of a word, it makes that word become a lifestyle or profession. And the example that I usually use is, you may paint one time, but that doesn't make you a painter. A painter is someone that does this as a lifestyle or as a profession. You may drive one time, but that doesn't make you a driver. You don't do that. You don't become a driver until you do it habitually. Well, the same is true here with the giver in verse 7 and the sower in verse 10. Now, He supplies seed to the sower, not to the person that sows every now and then.